Heyning, and I am going to be sharing with you what is a quick introduction to prompt engineering and specifically writing quality prompts both for Stable Diffusion and for Midjourney. We're also going to talk about other generative tools as well, for example, training your own models, and a little bit about text generation as well, but we're going to primarily stick with image generation today. My name is Evo Heyning. I have a design lab and gallery in California called Reality Craft. It is just south of Pixar. I'm in the Bay Area in California, and I recently wrote a book called Promptcraft, which is a guidebook to generative media tools of all types and how to get started with the language of that. That is currently available on Amazon Kindle for free if you use Kindle Unlimited, or it's also available in paperback. I'm currently working on the next version that will be out in about a month. So we're going to explore a little bit of Promptcraft today for the White Mirror community. For those of you who are creating new types of media and stories, we're going to be exploring a number of different tips and tricks you might take into your work, including characters, settings. We're going to talk about concept design and how to bring some of these things to life. These crystal cats being one example of a piece that I did a couple of months ago for a character study. So we are here basically to help you create the worlds you want to live in. I want to help you think about being very intentional about the worlds you create, whether those are protopian or solar punk or other version of White Mirror. I want you to think about how every word you put into a prompt brings something new out of it. And so think carefully about the kinds of words you want to use. Reality Craft itself is a whole design process. We're not going to go through the whole design process today, but we are going to explore some of the pieces of it so that you can engage in those for your own world building. So obviously, when we are creating a new story, there is a lot of world building, and Promptcraft, specifically writing a good prompt, can help realize and design that world. We're going to explore a little bit of how to do that, both through words, but also through parameters, images, numbers, and even characters like emoji. So when we are getting started in image generation, if you haven't had a chance to get into Mario's workshop, for example, this is how you get started in Midjourney. This is the command line, basically, prompt, but you do it in Discord, specifically to the Midjourney bot. And so you're having a conversation with a bot that is generating from your text. Typing /imagine is how that starts. There are other commands as well you can do in Midjourney, but this is the starting place. When you're thinking about forming a prompt, there are a couple of different elements, and we're going to explore those really quickly together. This is a simple formed prompt in Midjourney. It has three components. You'll see at the front are URLs for images. Those are reference images that can be brought into any generation. There is also text. So in this case, a field of tulips in the style of Mary Blair is what we would call a cluster or a snippet of text that is a description both of the subject of the work, but also of the style. And then the pieces at the end where there are two dashes and no farms, those are parameters. And we're going to explore each of the parameters just a little bit today, not in detail. When you are going through the generation process, we start with writing a prompt. And in Midjourney, you get 4 images. And then from there, you do what we call upscale and variate. So that's U and V. The U upscale will take a smaller image and make it larger and more detailed. A V, in this case, variation, will take the exact same. If you look at this grid of 4 and you think of it as top left 1, top right 2, bottom left 3, bottom right 4, you can then make a variation of any of those 4 pieces, and it will then take it in 4 new directions. So when we're working with Midjourney specifically, it may take many variations to get closer to the type of design you have in mind. Frequently, the first round isn't what you want, and you have to go through and refine remix, variate, and then do a number of other tricks like blending. So we're going to talk through some of these sort of quick topics of image generation. These are a couple of images I did a month ago that are blended images in the sense that I used both a physical reference image and I also used my own art and brought them together into a composition. So when you're thinking about bringing together your own compositions, a prompt, in this case in Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or any of the open source versions that you might choose, a prompt is a series of words, numbers, and other characters that express an idea that can be generated. That's pretty basic. These are the types of things that are going to go into a prompt. There is number one, content type. So in Midjourney, that might look like poster, sticker. It might look like the kind of media you are trying to get out the other side, because if you give it some indication, if you need a die cut, it's going to give you things that are potentially die cut. Content type will help refine the generation. Description is the cluster of information, the actual scene descriptor. If you can imagine like reading a script, and the first 2-3 lines of every scene are going to describe the scene. That is what's happening here. They're actually describing the subject, but also potentially the background as well as the foreground. So the field of flowers or the cat riding a bike, that is the description of the actual subject of the piece. Style, style word might be referencing a style of art like Art Nouveau or Impressionism, Surrealism. It might be referencing a type of artistry or a place where art exists, like Art Station. It can also reference a specific artist, as you saw in the Mary Blair example with the flowers. Style words are used very differently depending on whether you're in Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, or other tools. Obviously, there is some movement in this space. And if you're using Midjourney V5, you may want to put your style words at the front, as this can improve. For example, if you're trying to get to a non-photo image, putting your style words at the top can help it be less photorealistic. With Midjourney and with Stable Diffusion as well, you're going to find that different versions have different quality types, and you're going to learn to work with those over time. But Midjourney V5, the current latest iteration that's out, is deeply photorealistic by nature. So that's what happens when you need to go to a more illustrated style or something that is more artistic. You need to let it know upfront what type of style. Now, composition words are going to be anything that would be used in stage direction or cinematography, something like a two-shot, a close-up, lens type as well can also be included here. And then parameters. And we're going to talk a little bit about parameters because those include things that specifically modify an algorithm. So when you are trying to write a prompt, Midjourney can take 50 words or more. It can take, I think, 4,000 characters now. Frequently, people start with writing a prompt that might be 10 or 20 words and then adding to it. So you can do that through the variations and through what we call remixing in Midjourney, where you are basically adding layers or adding words to your prompt every time in order to refine it and get closer to what you're going for. So don't stop the first time. That's the key here. You want to experiment. You want to think about writing prompts that surprise you, that have a little bit of an element of perhaps mystery to them, right? So if you use a short prompt, for example, a 3-word prompt here, this is confused, surrealist, dripping. I've used there an emotion word, a style word, and a very evocative word. And that combination, and you can make that combination about anything you want, that particular combination, an emotion, a style word, and something evocative, that is a great place to start. And then from there, you can begin to really include all of those other elements that you know want to be there. So if you're thinking about how you are going to experiment with these tools, this is Stable Diffusion versus Midjourney basically 2 versions ago. So Stable Diffusion is on the left, Midjourney is on the right. Both of these were taken from an image from an Art Nouveau magazine. This would have been a turn of the century French zine. So you can see what both of them did, quite different artistic styles. They interpret things like Art Nouveau differently. So you may want to try more than one tool. If you're not getting the art you're looking for out of the first tool, try a different one. If you are trying to figure out within your prompt language how to go from one tool to the other, Prompter Guide, and this is prompterguide.com. Prompter Guide is developed by a guy named Shane, and this is an amazing tool. It's in a Google worksheet, but basically it has tons of drop downs. So if you don't find that you have the language for something, or you have a great prompt in Midjourney, but you want it to work for Stable Diffusion, maybe 1.5 or 2.1, you can switch between them here. So this will help in the formation of your prompts. There's also a visual notebook and a way to keep track of things that work for you here. So I'm going to encourage you. It's a donate if you find it useful tool. So please donate if you find Shane's tools useful for your own work. I do recommend trying to keep track of your Promptcraft, specifically the words that work for you. Right. So I know that I like working with labradorite and I like working with iridescence. So these are words that I come back to, whether it's for a fine art concept or for a world building concept as well. So just a quick summary. Image prompts, they work in Stable Diffusion, they work in Midjourney, they work in lots of different tools. An image prompt is a really great way to build on your existing body of art. In Midjourney, you can also blend up to 5 images at once. And so you can take existing art and a character and try and blend them in new ways to come up with new types of compositions as well. So these are ways in which you can begin to create variation or maybe explore an idea that you want to go deeper in, whether that's something lifelike, like a concept design piece like this, or it's something more abstract, or for something maybe a concept development, or in your storytelling, trying to figure out how to bring something to life differently. So specifically when you are doing the world building work, I want you to keep track of the language that works for you. That could be specific art periods or styles. Using terms like year and then the date can help in your prompts if you're trying to get to a particular period of time as well. So let's talk a little bit about those parameters, the pieces at the end of an image prompt. And these are what we call algo mods or algorithmic modifiers. They are used to improve what you get out of the generative tool. They work in Midjourney with 2 dashes, but there are ways in which they also work in Stable Diffusion and in other tools as well. The syntax and the grammar has changed just a little bit with these, but in Midjourney, you'll see they're always formed with these 2 dashes and then no space. If you're trying to do, for example, what we call a negative weight to get something out of your image, you use the word no. So here it's no farms, so that no farms show up in the picture. And then the other 2 parameters that you see just after on the right side here are IW, which is image weight. That's how much emphasis to give the images at the top of the prompt. And then the second one is AR, which is aspect ratio. Very important for a filmmaker. You might want to keep everything you do in a 3:2 or a 16:9 aspect ratio. So common aspect ratios work very well. You can use a ratio on these, as you can see here with the tulips, but ratios are also normalized. So you can use a pixel count as well. You would just form that this way, -- AR 1920 1280, used 1060, whatever you're going to use there. So pixels or ratios work if you are trying to get to a specific aspect ratio. If you are trying to generate for a landscape or a vertical video layout, I would encourage you to start there. Start your image generation with the same place in mind. Start with your aspect ratio and then keep going all the way through. This is going to help you, for example, if you have design ideas that you want to take not just through a deck, but also into video and other forums. So these were some concepts from a recent piece I did. I end up using these as Zoom backgrounds. They're very useful for that kind of thing. And everyone's got their own spin on what's going to work for them. So So these are some of the interior concepts I've done. These are very low res. So you can see I haven't even upscaled these to a max size yet. And you can see what happens with a square image. It's going to end up looking too grainy. So if you're trying to get to something that looks more sort of magazine designer quality, you might, again, start with your aspect ratio in landscape mode, and then you're going to need to upscale these images quite a bit. Upscaling is what's going to get you closer to what you're going for in terms of your quality long term. So it's from the same sample. This is Midjourney V5. You can see that Midjourney is getting a high degree of quality with light. You can do quite a bit with shadow now. You can do quite a bit with concept ideation and set building. However, these are going to be 2D images, and you might want to build a 3D environment from that. So just to summarize, if you're trying to use these tools on your own, locate that URL. You can even bring it up to the Midjourney bot. If you're trying to do an image prompt for the first time, you can just send it to Midjourney and then copy and paste the URL. And then this is how you form that prompt. And then you can add your own text. You can even add emoji and other things as well to it. So again, Midjourney lets you remix up to 5 images at once, and that's called a blend. So all of these things are things that you can experiment with. These are recent experiments from Midjourney V5, and I wanted to give you a sense of sort of where you can expect realism to appear at this point. V5 is not perfect. As you can see, the elder woman on the right has a necklace piece with no chain on it. Things like that do still happen, and most of what you're going to get out of Midjourney might still need to be refined. Also, you can go and then take it out into another animation tool. This is, for example, in what is Revel XYZ. Revel and Kyber are both short animation tools that will work from a single image, and they are built on the same tools that we've seen at Deforum. So if you're familiar with Hugging Face, for example, some of these tools are in the Hugging Face community as well. So just wanted to give you some samples of ideas that you might want to take into your own portraiture or storytelling, thinking about whether you want a photorealistic style mixed with an art style, or maybe something that looks more sort of pop art. These are pieces I did playing on ideas of pointillism, as pointillism and stained glass and other tools are very painful to make in physical art. I tend to like to explore that space. I also find drag is a really great place to experiment with the edges of an image generator. So thinking about your character design as being a very detailed art experiment. This is where Midjourney V5 is right now with drag. And if you're trying to get specific to, for example, a character that might be beautiful, but from a very specific culture, I want you to think about using the words from that culture. For example, prompting for a woman, in this case, from her native language. So using the word beautiful from the language, whether that's in Arabic or Japanese, you can see what that does. Just using the language creates that distinction of where that woman is from. So these are the kinds of tools you can think about using in your own writing as well. These are for a concept I'm currently working on, which is a new album. And so we're thinking about ways in which characters come to life in very broad ways. Midjourney is great for humor, and you can see you can get a fair amount of juxtaposition and realism. So getting a cat to ride a bike, for example, these are things that weren't really possible until a couple of weeks ago in many of these tools. They were very tricky to pull off. But as you can see now, Midjourney V5 can get a cat to ride a bike, and then you can animate that as you wish. So if you are taking your art and then building what we call a training model, I teach this in an advanced topics workshop, and we're not going to go into too much detail here with screen sharing, but you can go to a handful of tools. One of them is scenario.com. Another one you might want to try is Leonardo.ai. So Scenario is built for those who build games, and so you can train a training model on your characters, your gems, your backgrounds, every aspect of the game you're building. If you're using Leonardo, you can do the same. You're just creating a training set of your characters, let's say, in this case, the crystal cats, and then I could just generate endlessly off of that training set. So if those are the kinds of challenges you're trying to sit with, I'm going to encourage you to check out tools. Scenario.com is great for the game designers. Leonardo.ai also includes in-painting and out-painting and canvas tools. There are some other great painting tools out there, Playground and others that some of you may be using. So I'm going to encourage you to keep sharing what's working for you. I do share some of my Promptcraft on TikTok and other places, so I want to encourage you to reach out if that's the support you need from me. Please let me know. I want you to also think broadly about how to prompt for building sort of wild new worlds. It does not take a lot to get to something like this, but in this case, this image here was a blended image where I had to give it a lot of room to understand palette. And you need to think about prompting for colorscape and palette as well as for style. These are window boxes from a tool called Blockade Labs. These are 360 window boxes that are prompted. And so if you go to Blockade Labs, you can actually make a full skybox and a 360 scene, and then you can go and shoot your whole video there as well. So these are places where you might want to try and build your maybe a 3D scene and shoot within versus shooting all in 2D. These are all options for you. So whether you're trying to do something that feels sort of surreal or in the realm of magical realism, or you're trying to create something that's completely new and feels very different from other worlds, sometimes it helps to create a fully immersive environment as you're going into that process. So these are recent pieces that specifically required me to use words like vibrant in order to get to that kind of colorscape. I often use words related to biomimicry, to the type of light, like the type of sunlight I want shining past them. Those kinds of things are great for establishing shots. So I want you to be thinking sort of creatively at this point where you can take your Promptcraft. Sometimes it's good just to type imagine and a single word and figure out what comes next. You might end up with something like this for an album cover. You might end up for something that ends up being useful for world design. These are world design concepts I did about 6 weeks ago. And when creating a world, I will typically make maybe 300 to 500 reference images, and then I will curate from that set, maybe 50 to 75 that I like. And then from there, build a training model that works for me. So once I've got an art style I like, for example, with this lotus temple, I might build a number of them and then have it ready for something, whether it's a graphic novel or a film project like White Mirror. So thinking about how to nail down your art style is one of the trickiest portions of this, and finding the language for your art style can be a little bit tricky as well. So I want you to think about going to Prompter Guide and other tools where the language of Promptcraft is very clear and simple. But also think about whether you're looking for photorealism, for example, like these pictures, or you're looking for something far more abstract or dreamy. This is sort of a hyper-realism of gems up close. Again, in this case, I was testing Midjourney to see if it could draw facets in a relatively realistic way. Obviously, these are not cut the way gems should be cut, but you do get a fair amount of brilliance, and you can do a lot with that kind of thing. So here's a couple of quick tips. When you are thinking about Promptcraft, you want to use one really good verb for an image generator. Now, When you're doing chat and text generation, the verbs you use, like describe, explain, enumerate, and list, aren't going to work for an image generator. So you have to think about verbs that are appropriate and can be illustrated, like running or giving. So, because that's a physical thing that can be depicted. So make sure you give it one verb that can be depicted if you're trying to show an action. You want to keep it simple. Focus on the nouns and the adjectives, especially the big descriptive words, and think about the big discovery. Think about the big question that you're holding, and then lead that inquiry. Don't let the tool lead you too much. If you're letting the tool kind of lead you all over the place, you're going to get a lot of stuff that may not be useful. So that's where those parameters and constraints are really important so that you can build a better bank of content, whether you're trying to get to content for the blog posts and the editorial stuff, or you're trying to get to something that's much more sort of book or dreamy. You're trying to get to weird stuff. I love that this one literally just came out of one word, surrealism, out of Midjourney V5, and I got this lovely character in a business suit. He cracked me up. So think playfully, and sometimes it's okay to leave a little bit of room for discovery. So when I asked Midjourney to for example, imagine future VR devices, this is what I came up with for a museum on the VR industry. So please think about how you can use those art style words very creatively in fun ways, whether you're trying to figure out how to build sort of the sci-fi world, or you're thinking about something that's much more sort of the real world. Obviously, you can use blending and all of those tools to really think about creating a space for inquiry in your own storytelling. And finally, if you are working on storyboarding, there is a tool that's useful for you. It's called 10Zebra. It's in early beta. The creators of 10Zebra are offering it to the folks at White Mirror. So if you are creating and you need a storyboarding tool that is designed for generative work, 10Zebra is one way to go. So I think we're just about to wrap up, and I do have a little bit of time, I think, for some questions. But if you didn't get to your question in this, you can also pick up the book or reach out to me. I am at evo.ist, and my handles are right there. So please let me know if I can support you in any way.
Thank you a lot, Evo. So really inspiring and a lot of value. So thanks a lot. I just have one question. So what is the overall tools that you use for your prompts? So mainly you use Midjourney for the creation of the artworks, and then there are some animation tools. But what would you say? How many tools you use overall? Are this 5 or 10 tools or more maybe?
Okay, so I often start in Midjourney. When I'm ideating and working on a concept, I will start in Midjourney. If I'm not getting what I need there, I will go to like a Dream Studio or a Leonardo or a different tool in like a Stable Diffusion version. I do use what we call Control Net occasionally, and that is helping with composition. And once I've built a training set to be able to create, for example, posable characters and things like that. That is an advanced topic, and we're not going to get too far into that today. But Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, and many versions of Stable Diffusion. I use Scenario for training, and I've used a few other tools for training models as well. There's quite a bit at Hugging Face that I experiment with in terms of video, animation, and also multimodal. And we didn't talk too much about multimodal prompting here, but there are ways in which you can combine these tools effectively. And I've been exploring in Hugging Face, especially with some of those tools. So I use 4 different video tools right now. AugX Labs is one of them. So that's Augie. I use Pictory as well. I use the animation tools I mentioned are Rebel XYZ and Kyber, K-A-I-B-E-R. Those are good places to get started if you maybe want to see a lot of iterations of something, or you just want to make a quick TikTok and see where it takes you. Yeah, that's a starting place, I will say. There's obviously a lot more there we can pull apart.
But that's also a lot of tools. I think the tough cookie currently is at this exciting time we live is that they are popping up every day, new tools, right? So it feels like there's coming every day some new tools, and you always have to dig into new tools. So it's an interesting time, I would say, right?
Yes, absolutely. The trick has been to find the right tool at the right time. So I write about my favorite tools on LinkedIn in a newsletter called Generations. And I try to review them fairly and honestly. I'll be doing that at the broadcasting conference in Las Vegas in 2 weeks, or a week and a half, I suppose. So those kinds of public, whether it's workshopping with a new tool or even just doing a public demo with other artists. We also do salons here in California. So if you're ever in California and you want to come to the gallery and just create together, I do that with storytelling teams here as well.
Sounds really cool.
It's fun.
So then one question to the audience. Are there questions from your side? Feel free as well to come up to the stage. Therefore, you just need to click on this raise your hand button. And as well, just use the right inside the chat function. Just bring up some questions in the chat box if there is something. I guess see there. I think so.
I will happily share the slides.
And I think that that's nice to get a general chat and as well maybe something which could participate right now in this session live. I think that we'll just get watch recording and then see the videos of the slides.
Yes, so I'm going to write a few of them down that we haven't necessarily explored in this session, but scenario.com, I want to thank our friends team. They definitely come from more the game design industry, but are fantastic. 10 Zebra, he is down in Southern California, PhD in computer vision, is really focused on storyboarding puzzle. And let's put Meet Augie there as well. They're a really lovely team. So that's AugX Labs. And AugX Labs is making it very easy to make videos with basically B-roll using Getty footage. So you just put your generative script in and you can do a voiceover and B-roll and everything. Make videos very fast that way. Now, it's not going to be the same as generating images, but you can generate inside Augie. And more of these tools, what we're seeing is video tools, for example, giving you the generative tool inside the video editing suite. So it's becoming easier to do everything in one and not have to go to 10 places.
Nice, cool. That's really